So welcome everyone to our Fireside Chat style webinar today, Navigating Data Compliance Challenges. Today, we're hoping to take a deep dive into the intricacies of data governance and compliance. And we have two distinguished experts with us today. Mark Dennis, welcome from Evolve North. And we have David Cartwright from ComplyKEY. A big thank you, Dave, for stepping in today. Most of you might have seen that we had Mark Mulcahy down as a speaker, but he unfortunately couldn't attend today. So thank you very much, Dave. So I suppose just to go through, my name is Laura. I'm going to be your moderator for today's discussion. And over the next 30 minutes, we want to explore the top 5 data compliance challenges facing organizations today. We're going to cover managing subject access requests, freedom of information requests, the evolution of ransomware attacks, compliant redaction, data incident response plans. So there's a lot to get covered. So without further ado, we're going to get started. And I would like to start today with a bit of interaction from yourselves with a poll. And it should pop up on your screens at the moment. So the poll is, which data compliance challenges do you find the most pressing in your organization today? So whether it be managing SARs or FOIA, compliant redaction, ransomware evolution, human error, data incident response plans, or cyber essentials. So if you just get a second, maybe just press which you think would be the most pressing challenge for your organization. And what I'll do is I will have cut up the answers and we can discuss as we go through the organization. At the moment, it's looking quite even actually between responding to SARs, ransomware evolution, and compliant redaction, which is quite interesting. We'll obviously be touching on each of these subjects throughout the presentation today. Okay, so I'm just going to end the poll there, and I will stop the slide presentation. So I suppose now we're going to turn our attention to our speakers. Mark, welcome again. So Mark, you're specializing in IT security and information governance consulting at Evolve North. Welcome to today. And David, you're a specialist in data management and compliance software application at ComplyKEY. So I suppose, Mark, let's get stuck in. Could you share your insights on best practices for efficiently handling subject access requests or freedom of information requests for data regulation?
Yeah, as a business, we've been around for, nearly 20 years now. And during that period of time, we've dealt with some, let's just call them substantial subject access request situations. In fact, we have one client who's famously received over 15,000 in 1 week, which is quite a shock to the system. So we're very kind of sensitive to the requirements of SARs. But before we start really talking about how fulfilling a SAR, we need to make sure we've got a few basic controls in place. We need to make sure that our staff can recognize a SAR. We regularly get clients calling us when the ICO's contacted them and said, or another regulator said, why have you not fulfilled this subject access request? And they simply haven't been aware of it because the member of staff who had that verbally given to them didn't recognize what it was, didn't understand what they need to do with this. So again, we need to get that basic control in place. If the organization has very high levels of subject access requests coming in on a regular basis, then we need to look at the root cause of that, because it may be that we can adjust the root cause and try and understand why we're getting those high levels of SARs coming through the business. And we need to do this before we look at better ways of responding. We can look at some tools, portals, providing information, certainly internally for staff as a possibility. If all of these things are pretty much in good order, we then need to look at better ways of responding. And that would be things like software tools, better utilization of 365, better utilization of the information that you have, making sure that you've reduced the, how can we put it, the period that you're looking at down to a very limited amount of data to return to the client. The tools we have now compared to even 2-3 years ago are quite remarkable. And the nice thing about them is that they can be fulfilled accurately and significantly reduce the time required to fulfill those subject access requests. It's a very, very difficult thing to deal with because the breadth and depth of what you're looking at and trying to fulfill sometimes can be quite huge. So, David, from your perspective, tools that can help.
I think the first thing to do is you've got to recognise that this is a company-wide effort. So any tool that can help spread this load, if you have a case manager looking at the case that comes in, they may not immediately know where that data is, but if the tool lets them effectively sort of dissipate those questions, and the tool then keeps track of all the timings, when should these things be back, and collates that information into one place, that's a massive advantage. Really, any sort of position of case manager, they want to be able to just do the minimum job on that case that they have to do, and then be able to sort of spread that load around the rest of the organization, but have the confidence that the tool is looking after the dates, all of the data is in one place. There's a full and complete audit trail of who did what, when, capability recording why you did it or why you didn't do it, and then an aggregation of that data that you can just send back to the requester, and also fill in at the same time, how the request, was it fulfilled in full, was it held back because of various exemptions, and if the tool can show you what those exemptions you're allowed to use are, all the better, so that you get a constant, the data is constant. There isn't any variation. Take the human variation out of the process using the tools that are there.
Okay. That probably brings us on nicely then, I suppose, particularly when it comes to SARs and freedom of information requests. Often data that is within those requests, when they're being fulfilled, will have to be redacted. Mark, what's your perspective on, I suppose, best key redaction, best practices and essentials for data compliance?
Yeah, I mean, compliant redaction and meeting the expectations of not just the data subject, but also the regulators like the Information Commission's Office, where there's really little or no guidance, is quite a challenge. We've seen a lot of situations where, let's call them a poor subject access request response has been fulfilled, and that leads to subsequent subject access requests, and sometimes that data subject becoming very unhappy with that process because they feel as if they're being blocked from getting the information that they want. And we do see the ICO getting involved quite often, even today, where a data subject says, well, I've asked for this information 3 times now. Each time they return the information, it's been different. And I'm still not getting the information that I'm looking for, even though I've detailed it to them. So again, this is really where we need to utilize the technology that's available to support that extraction, that redaction, and that access highly effectively. If we've got a process that is utilizing technology, and there's a mistake or an error in that process, it will be a consistent error. You can fix consistent errors really easily. When you've got human beings doing the bulk of your redaction, you are then really struggling with that, because if you get inconsistencies on the human level, they're very, very difficult to fix because it's down to that individual human being. When I mentioned the very large 15,000 subject access requests we had previously with the client, there was a team of 25 working on those responses. And they were using very little. They were using redaction software, but they were using very little other tools to help. And one of the big problems we had was that 15,000, we maybe probably got a further 3,000 again because we're doing a really poor response. So again, the workload increasing the chance of mistakes, and that's when the regulators get involved. People get really upset, and that's a difficult thing to manage, because at the end of the day, when people are asking for this information, it tends to be quite an emotive request. It's not a business request like an FOI, and it's a request about their personal world.
Okay, so that you've mentioned about redaction tools, I suppose, and Dave, I know with ComplyKEY, I've partnered with SmartBox AI to provide redaction to our clients. I suppose, can you provide any insights into techniques and tools for secure data redaction, and why the purpose of using tools and technology for redaction?
Well, it's backing up what Mark said there. I mean, as you say, we are partnering with somebody, and we're quite lucky in that you can't go anywhere now without reading about AI being utilised, and I think this is an excellent use of using AI. We can use that tool to have consistent redaction, and then we can do sort of spot sampling, see how that redaction is looking, and if it's good, fine. If it's not so good, we can tweak the model. We can sort of change the tool, not the tool set, but we can change the operation of the tool to improve that redaction. We get consistency across the board, and as the confidence grows, there's sort of less of the spot checking that we have to do. We are just, I suppose, we are for the first time making use of. It's just another avenue of AI, but let's make use of the sort of the smarts within computer. It isn't an area that we've been able to apply before, but now it's tremendous that that technology has come into this area and that we can apply it. Just to remove the PII, it knows what PII is, and we can tweak and tune it to ever improve it, really, which can save, as Mark said, can save sort of hundreds of man hours. And we don't have to say, well, did Laura redact it or did Mark redact it? The only judge there is the colour of the pen. But now we can have an audit trail. We know who did it. We know what the goal and the remit was for the redaction. It is an excellent, clear process with a sort of definable outcome. So
Okay, great. This might actually just be a good time to say, if anyone has any questions, you can ask them in the chat panel, and I'll keep an eye on them, and I can ask them throughout, or we can try and sum them up at the end as well. I just kind of want to move on from that as well, then, to kind of the landscape of ransomware attacks. We see it in the news all the time. I suppose, Mark, how does this evolving landscape of ransomware attacks have implications on data security? And have you seen it in your organization with your clients?
Yes, I mean, although we're a relatively small organization, we deal with many hundreds of clients and pretty much every type of industry vertical, not just in the UK, across the rest of the world as well. So we see a lot of the ransomware attacks and how they're manifested on clients and third parties. And supply chain is a big one. Obviously, when supply chain gets hit, your clients get hit. But what we've seen over the last really 2 years, and it's kind of post-COVID, really, is the best way to describe it, is we've seen the industrialization and the commercialization of ransomware by 2 or 3 leading ransomware gangs, primarily Lockbit, Black Cat, and Conti, really. There's others, but they're the main players. And we always look at Lockbit because they apparently are the root of 1/3 of all global successful ransomware attacks currently. So wherever they go, the rest of the market will follow. They have built what can only be described as a channel business model. They have affiliates, they have help desks, they have software bug fixes, they have everything that you would expect from a Microsoft or a Google or an Apple of this world. They're moving to I hate to use the word people, but they're moving to an ethical business model. Where they place guarantees. If you pay your ransomware, they guarantee your data will not appear in the dark web, and if it does appear, they will give you your money back without question.
Are they cyber essentials, man?
Yeah, well, these boys I think they can generally find their way around most things. But interesting, last year, an affiliate of Lockbit actually ransomwared a children's hospital in Canada, and this came straight up on the Lockbit business model team. Wherever they see their stuff, they immediately sent the decryption keys to the hospital, apologized, and said that they had removed the affiliate from their program. And bear in mind they're Russian. How they removed the affiliate, I don't really want to think about. But let's just say they stood by their guarantee, shall we say? The other major change, which we've only seen one case of this, but we have heard about this anecdotally elsewhere. We are referring to it as data kidnap because we don't know what else to call it, to be honest. The ransomware gang infiltrate your organization and they take a copy of all of your data. We've seen a few months ago a 13 terabyte data copy executed in a few hours. They leave your business intact. They don't ransomware encrypt the data. Your clients don't know, your staff don't know, your IT department probably doesn't even know. And then what they do is they approach the senior management team, board, and they put a kidnap demand in for them to give the data back to you rather than a ransomware type demand. And they will use usual threats, things like we'll sell your data on the dark web in 21 days. Lockbit even have a countdown page on their website of people's businesses and when they're going to start selling the data. They're typically targeting third-party supply chains for this because get one, get many. And it's really, really moving on at the pace. The most interesting thing or disturbing thing I've heard in the last few months was we were at a Microsoft briefing by the head of security, and the head of security at Microsoft said to us, how big do you think the ransomware market is? If it was a country, an economy, everyone gets like 25th, 26th in the world. They are the fourth biggest economy on the planet if they're a country. Ransomware is the fourth biggest economy.
Wow.
Microsoft says the ransomware market will be bigger than Microsoft within 5 years. So that's the scale of what we're looking at. This is partially allowed because they have safe operating environments in Russia, North Korea, places like that, Middle East. And at the moment, it still probably remains the number one fear among our client base that either they have a ransomware attack successfully done on them or one of their third-party suppliers. And they are definitely targeting supply chain now. I would say 7, 8 out of 10 things we see are done on supply chain. So yeah, it's something we need to kind of really be aware of, and we really need to consider, and we'll talk about this a little further on, we need to consider how we deal with those situations in a much more granular way.
And Mark, how do you think the significance of like training awareness in preventing, I suppose, there's obviously ransomware attacks, but also in preventing like data compliance breaches within an organization? We hear human error, disclosing data that they shouldn't, or opening an email, or these kind of things.
Well, there's some really interesting statistics which I looked at recently around human error. Globally, industry organizations spend about $1 billion per annum on cybersecurity, technical controls, firewalls, encryption, multi-factor authentication, around about $1 billion. And that's growing at around 10-15% per annum, which is probably what it needs to be. The really interesting thing is when I looked for those statistics on training, awareness, and professional development of IT and data protection staff, I couldn't actually find any. The only assumption we could make was it's probably less than 1% of the technical spend. Yet, when we look at it, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all breaches, incidents, loss, ransomware attacks are due to human error. Simple as that. We're all collectively going to have to spend more time, effort, and money on not only training and making staff more aware and giving them better tools to deal with this stuff, but also training and developing our IT security data protection people. At the end of the day, the human being is the last line of defense. When whatever it is, arrives at their desktop, it's avoided all those clever technical controls. So we will always rely upon that human being as the last line of defense. I think we have got our spend on those elements, those people, we're way too low collectively. And I include ourselves in that to some extent. And we do it for a living.
Yeah. And okay, just to bring on, I suppose, just talking about the data breach management, we talked about human error. And I suppose in many cases, some organizations don't even know if they've had a data breach. It could be sending emails to a group that they shouldn't be sending it to that would have maybe PII data in it. But then I suppose when it does happen, Dave, this question is for yourself. How can organizations apply tools to better manage data breach management or better facilitate data breach management and the response of it?
I think it starts at giving everybody a clear and obvious portal by which they can record the data breaches without fear of recrimination. That's the other thing. We deal with multiple organizations. Some they said, we had 3 last year. And inside you're thinking, no, you didn't. You just got 3 before. Whereas you get the others who say, well, we have hundreds. But by having those hundreds, it's like anything. If you can collect that data, it's useful data because you know what's going on, you know what needs fixing. The organizations that have 3 a year, they don't really know what's going on. The organizations that have 100, they'll be doing their best. And the software, it serves 2 purposes. It keeps track of these breaches, but at the same time, it gives you a roadmap as what can we do to improve it? What can we do so what recommendations did we put in place to stop it happening next time? Are there patterns? Is it the same department, the same person, the same process? So keeping track of that data, having a process, all builds up to ways of just stopping it happening. You've got to accept that it is going to happen, but the most important thing is, what are you doing once it does happen? Can you show a demonstrable path of, we tracked it, we contacted the data subjects, if need be, we contacted the ICO or the DPC, but then what did we do to fix it? What were the recommendations? And can we see that those recommendations were put in place? And if the software lets you track that, and if an auditor walks in and sort of says, show me what you're doing, if this can be clearly demonstrated, and we know this from our own sort of ISO 27001, there's a great sort of joy in presenting an auditor with something, and they're happy with it. They can see, right, I can see what you're doing. And it sounds sad, so you think, I'm quite pleased with that. It's quite nice that you can demonstrate a process. You may not always get it right, but you've got a process. It makes the auditor's life easier. It makes your life easier. Just everything works better for the company. And it's continual improvement. That's the other thing they're looking for. Keep track of what you're doing so you can improve it. And if the software can help you do that, then all the better.
Yeah. Mark, I might just throw that back to you, because you would deal with the regulatory authorities a lot, a good bit with your clients. And how do you think that they would respond to being able to show that you are monitoring things, you're watching things, you're making continuous improvement in order to be better, to stop these data breaches happening by identifying when they are happening and who's responsible?
Yeah, I mean, the landscape's changed hugely in the last 2-3 years. If we do a lot of work building, developing and testing cyber incident response plans for clients. If I go back 3-4 years, it was something we maybe did once a quarter. We're probably doing 2 or 3 a month now. The drivers behind that are, it's become an expectation from regulators like the ICO, also from the likes of the Financial Conduct Authority, but also insurance companies. When they're doing their due diligence for cyber insurance, they are requesting that you have a suitable cyber incident response planning process in place. Building a SERP is not a replacement for your BCP, your DR, or your breach procedure or policy. It is mutually supportive. One can trigger the other. But fundamentally, you need to prepare to fail. This is not a positive conversation.
I'm sorry.
Damage that's occurring, and the key thing about a cyber incident. Sorry, go on.
No, we just lost.
The key thing about a cyber incident response plan is that it goes. The key thing behind a cyber incident response plan is that we have a structured response with named responsibilities, clear lines of communication, clear tasks deployed, so we can react very, very rapidly to a situation. It's like any incident, it's that golden hour, or 2 hours or 3 hours. We need to react effectively. And the other thing is, it's a whole business response. This is not IT and data protection dealing with it, particularly when we have third parties who are compromised. And that third party, to be frank, IT probably don't know where that third party's data is, and the data protection officer can do little or nothing at this point. So it's how your business responds on a whole business response level. It allows you to control not just the incident and reduce the damage, but control the narrative so the damage doesn't escalate. We saw an offhand comment made by a call centre individual in a housing association in the Midlands in the UK about a year ago, when one of their third-party supply chain had been ransomwared. A tenant had rang in complaining that they couldn't load some information. The tenant asked the call centre person what was happening. Call centre person said, "Oh, I think we're having a ransomware attack." And within an hour, social media, local press, everything exploded. All of the script kiddies were sat at home with nothing to do, decided to have a go at this housing association. The brute force attacks got that bad they had to pull down services. Yet they were never, ever in a bad place. So again, that communication, staff, stakeholders, boards, executive teams, out to the press, to the media, controlling the narrative is absolutely critical. And I'll be honest, if you do one thing in 2024, build a SERP and test it. Because the things that you will learn, the understanding that will build throughout the organization by doing that will be phenomenal. And it is not an expensive process. It's literally days of work, not weeks of work. And it will help you as a business understand where your dependencies are. So what systems you truly depend upon and how do you deal with them if they're gone? And it asks the horrible questions as well. if you lost that third-party process, lost all your data, and it was ransomware and it was gone forever, what are you going to do? Because often I still walk into organizations where, senior level management are under the impression, they don't understand that a lot of their systems and data are owned by someone else and run by someone else. They think IT have them, and they don't.
Okay, that's a good point. Just before we just have a couple more questions, and I know we're coming up to time. I just want to pop up another poll for we've been talking about subject access requests. So I just want to know how confident our viewers are today with their organization's approach to handling subject access requests or freedom of information requests. So we'll just take a second to answer that. And I'll just read out the results. Again, if anyone has any questions, if they want to pop them in the chat, I'm trying to cover them off as we go through, but if there's any additional ones, I'll cover it. So someone has said very confident, interesting. And 50% are neutral. And just another second to see if there's anyone else to respond. So we've 50% neutral, 25 somewhat, and the rest, the last is 25% very confident. Okay. So I suppose, again, thank you both for your valuable insights. Mark, I just want to touch briefly upon one last topic, which is cyber essentials, which you guys at Evolve North help your clients with. What key cybersecurity practices do you consider essential for, I suppose, robust data protection?
Yeah, well, we live in a world where there's few, if any, solutions really genuinely available. And we start at the top of the food chain with 27001, which is a fantastic standard. And if you can commit to that, it's a great thing to have. I think for most people, employees like Cyber Essentials, particularly the Plus option, provides a highly cost-effective risk reduction approach. Not only does it reduce your real risks because it makes you follow good practices, it also demonstrates your stakeholders, your clients, your commitment to data protection and security. And for small businesses, well, all businesses who are cyber essential certified, they all get a free £25,000 worth of cyber insurance cover. I asked me the government body don't give that away to the heart. That's at a much lower risk. Hopefully, over the next week or two, there's going to be some statistics published by IASME and NCSC to do with Cyber Essentials Plus certification. And this is coming from the insurance company who sits behind IASME to provide the insurance cover for this, because they've now got 2 or 3 years under their belt of insurance claims. So they can compare that against the rest of the market where Cyber Essentials is not in place. And the risk reduction that they're currently quoting is in excess of 80% risk reduction. Now, that risk reduction is twofold. It's the first bit is it's a bit like having the alarm box and the barky dog at the house. They simply move along and they go and burgle another house. That's the reality of it. But also the people who try and brute force systems and businesses and organizations, they know if someone is CE plus certified, they've probably got their vulnerability patch management all up to speed. So they're going to be a very, very difficult place to get into. So again, they will simply move along. So that is, the kind of confidence level and reduction. Like any reduction, it'll only last so long because other things will come along and, the risks will increase again. But yeah, I mean, again, for a few £1,000s, literally, it does provide probably the most cost-effective reduction in vulnerabilities, and also demonstrates to the outside world that you're taking your stuff seriously.
Yeah, okay, very good. I do realize we're just up to time, so I'm going to put both of you on the spot. And just, Dave, starting with you, just if you could maybe give your top points for using tools to address challenges and what we kind of talked today, what would they be? So using software or technology or tools to address the compliance challenges such as subject access requests or data breach management. Kind of what would be your point here for people who's listening today?
Take the advantage of these tools having everything in one place, an easy interface that will guide sort of less experienced staff through some of the more complex processes, help people with complicated processes such as ROPA. There can be an easy option of ROPA, which then ends up with somebody who knows more about it, managing it. So just look at the interface, look how easy they are to use, and check that they've got good audit trails, make sure everything's in one place, and that they are secure. That's the other thing. Check where the platform is, check how it's guarded. So you've got to check the security of the security system, really.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And Mark, then to yourself, if you were to leave our guests today with maybe 1 point, what would it be?
I think from a prevention perspective, I would certainly say Cyber Essentials Plus, not just Cyber Essentials Basic Plus version, because it will put you in order with a lot of things. It'll force you into good practice and make you keep on top of it. And then obviously, you must prepare to fail. I'm sorry, but that's a grim reality of the world we live in. And the most cost-effective way to prepare to fail is to build a cyber incident response plan, and more importantly, test it in a tabletop environment and make that a whole business response test. That will not only get all of you thinking about how to manage that incident, that situation, it'll also make all of those functional departments aware of the fact that it's not IT and the data protection board's responsibility to fix this.
Okay, great. Thank you both again for joining us today. Hopefully we'll be able to continue some of these series. If anybody who's listening today has any topics that they would like covered, please, there'll be an email going out with the recording, and please respond to that, and we'll take all your opinions on board. The details on the slide here are for getting in contact with ComplyKEY and getting in contact with Evolve North. We'll be doing a follow-up email with the recording, and if you have any questions from that, please feel free to respond, and we can put you in contact with representatives from Evolve North and the representatives from ComplyKEY. So thanks again. Apologies for going over slightly, and we look forward to seeing everyone on our next webinar. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye for now.
Bye.